Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is
Scott Booker.
I'm really happy to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a little shocked that you waited 100 episodes before you came to me. No, I'm joking. No.
It's kind of more of a thing of like, I can't remember who said it, but it was like Nardwuar has a thing of like, just ask.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I could just ask.
Right. Well, it's funny, I don't know if any of your listeners know, but I basically created this school, the Academy of Contemporary Music at the University of Central Oklahoma. President Webb pushed the button to make it happen, but it was my idea to do something like this. And what I've discovered over the years is that about a great deal of our students are just too scared to come talk to me. And that to me was shocking to find out, because I feel like I'm a very open person and that I'm easy to speak to. And I think, so I was surprised when to find that out. So you can actually fill me in on my reputation now.
Well, I think that it's probably just the names and the career and the prestige or whatever that might mean to people. And it's like, oh, I can't mess with that, Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, and I've discovered this even meeting a lot of, celebrities or people that have done amazing things over the years, is that, they look at that as their life and that it's normal for them. So the idea that it's abnormal to other people, sometimes it's hard to register that. Mm-hmm. So for me, working with the Flaming Lips and having this amazing opportunity to start the school here and stuff, it wasn't like, there was this grand plan and, I was some, going on a mission to do it. It was like these were things that just happened to be opportunities that presented themselves in a certain time in my life. And just like you were saying, just ask. I mean, that same thing could be applied towards yourself of like, just try it, go for it. The idea of ACM actually started with just having one class. I need to stop saying I noticed in another podcast I say too much. So anyways, I'm gonna work on that.
That's fine. That's the way you talk.
Yeah. But the original concept of ACM really was just to be a music business class, because I'd noticed at a lot of other schools that claimed they taught about the music business, they really didn't teach about the modern music industry. They really just taught about how to join a union or things that were more specific towards Broadway, or if you were going to work in a symphony or something like that, which there's nothing wrong with that. And it's a great career to have and a different thing, but it's just different from my music business.
Exactly.
And I was at this meeting at the governor's mansion with this thing called Creative Oklahoma. And each table was a group of about 10 people, and there was maybe 200-300 people there. And I was at a table, and we were supposed to come up with something that tied commerce, culture, and education together. And, to be, honest, most of the people at the table, they'd been at a lot of meetings like this, and they weren't really that into it. They were just like, I'm just there doing my thing. But to me, it was very exciting, this concept. And I said, well, one of the things I've noticed was that there are no classes about the modern music business. So I thought, well, that covers culture, and that covers business, and that covers what was the third thing? Culture,
education.
Yeah, exactly. And so sitting next to me was the chancellor for the State Board of Regents at the time, and these are the people that decide what happens at colleges. And he said, let's make that happen.
Yeah.
And so we started with the idea of just a class. And then to speed things up, then I met President Webb and we started having these regular conversations. Yeah. And then the idea came up of like, oh, maybe we do something that's like a whole school. And lo and behold, there it happens.
Yeah.
This is probably not anything you were even going to ask me about.
It is actually.
Oh, good.
Which is great because you're already answering questions that I haven't asked.
Yeah, I can talk a lot. Yeah.
This is great. Yeah. That's what you're here for. So the actual first question, what do you do? If there even is a way of answering that.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, I do have specific titles, right? You know, so I'm the CEO and the executive director of the ACM at UCO, and ACM stands for Academy of Contemporary Music at the University of Central Oklahoma. And so that is a job that came later to me, right? You know, so ACM's been going on for a decade now. I started working on it about 12 years ago. I'm 53 now. So, you know, this was in my late 30s, early 40s when this was all kind of happening. Before that, though, the other thing that was very serious to me and still is being a manager of artists. And over the years, I've managed a bunch of artists, but there's been one constant, starting with the very first band I managed, which was the Flaming Lips. And I still work with them. Yeah. And they're very much a part of even ACM. I think that everything the Lips do, I'm a part of. And I think to some degree, everything I do, the Lips are a part of. And, you know, so managing bands is part of what I do. And then, you know, and then running the school. And then I also am trying to be very involved in the bigger picture of building the music industry, being a catalyst for building the music industry in a bigger way here in Oklahoma. Yeah. You know, because we've got such amazing talent. Yeah. In multiple ways, but if you just look at all the artists and bands and people that have come from here, but they've had to leave to become huge because either, you know, record labels were somewhere else or booking agents were somewhere else or just the infrastructure to exist was somewhere else. Nashville, Austin, LA, New York, Chicago, places like that. Yeah. To me, we were wasting a huge natural resource. And part of building the school was, in a sense, I kind of have a 30-year plan of getting us to the point of where we could be like in Nashville or in Austin or something. And the first part of it was, you know, the school and helping create a base of, you know, people that are trained to do this. Yeah. Right? You know, it's not like training to become, you know, a dentist where you're training for one specific kind of job. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to be an expert at. What gets difficult about art and the business of art and the machination around the creation of art is it's very fluid. Yeah. And that's hard for people that aren't artists or involved in that to understand. So a lot of times what I feel like I've been able to be, you know, kind of good at is explaining that difference to people that aren't already part of what we do as you know, artists or people that work in the art industries. And that's a skill set that I've been able to use to be a good band manager. Sure. Because a lot of times you're dealing with people that just think differently. You know, the band and the musicians have a mindset of what they want to do and how they want to do it. And the people that want to, and I'm going to use this word, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but this is what it technically is the people that exploit what artists do by, selling their music or selling their live shows or licensing their image for merchandise and those things. People are exploiting the rights that they are, given, usually for money, to be able to do something. So I've been able to kind of, communicate to artists what those people want, and then vice versa, communicate to the people that want to work with the artist what the artists really want. And I think that's part of the reason why the Lips have had such a long career, is that Wayne and the guys have been very receptive in understanding what the other people want. And that was something I've seen over my career, where bands would give up or break up and stuff. And it's usually because they had these preconceived notions about how the music industry worked. And, when they didn't become rich overnight, or when they got signed to a record label and they discovered that they still had to do the majority of the work,
right?
That they just didn't want to do it anymore, right? Or couldn't. Maybe there's this psychological thing where they just hit this point where I just, I can't do this anymore. It's too hard. And it is hard, making art and hoping that people care about it. And, that can be very, very, very difficult. So I hope that over the years I've been able to help, make that an easier path for both sides. Because my end goal is just for our lives to be richer through the great music that people create, that I can help them get it out there so people can hear it and just make everyone's lives better. I mean, there's nothing I think more blissful in a sense than listening to a record you really love.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah. So that's what I do.
Yes. What made you want to be a manager for artists?
I didn't think about it in that way. How I became a manager is kind of backwards. I was working in a record store called Rainbow Records, and that's where I met the Flaming Lips. But I was already a fan of their music. I would go see them anytime they played. And so they would see me, at that point, it's like you go see a local band here. Yeah. If you go to see their shows all the time, the band gets to know who you are, know who they are, and all of that. And I started promoting some shows. I did shows like a bunch of punk rock and indie rock stuff, like Super Chunk. I did a Nirvana show, and they didn't show up, and I lost my life savings. That was kind of rough. Yeah, $600. So it wasn't a huge life savings, but back then it was. Sure. And anyways, so I would do these shows. So I got to know the guys pretty well. And at one point we were living in this duplex, and I was on one side, and a couple of the guys from the band were on the other side. So we were hanging out quite a bit, and we got this phone call from someone from Warner Brothers Records, and they wanted to come out and see the band play. And I was like, well, let me help set this show up. So I called a venue down in Norman, called the owner, and we set up this show. And the person from Warner Brothers came to see him. Her name was Roberta Peterson, or is Roberta Peterson, and amazing woman. She signed the Dire Straits and Devo and Jane's Addiction and, just tons, Katie Lang, a very wide range of artists. And so this is pre-cell phones, pre-internet. And Roberta was at her hotel, and the band were about to go on, and she wasn't there. So I go down to the payphone and I call her, and I'm like, hey, they're about to go on.
Yeah.
Where are you at? And she's like, well, I called a taxi. And I was like, oh, there's no taxis in Norman. Let me come get you.
Sure.
So I drove her there, in my beat up old Chevy Chevette. And luckily for me, I had this sticker on the back of my window for a band called the Bodines. They're a band from Milwaukee. Never a huge act, but some people know them and stuff. And what I really liked was this Bodines sticker. It was the first one that was like plastic that just clung to glass, you know, and I thought that was really cool. And I liked the Bodines some, you know, I saw them play before. But anyway, she gets in my car and she notices that. And she's like, oh, you like the Bodines? I was like, yeah, you know, I saw them. I think they're great, you know. And we talked about that for a bit. And she went, saw the band play. And they were amazing, of course. And immediately afterwards, she's like, let's go get something to eat. And we went to Denny's because she thought that was funny too. But it was the only place open, you know, that late, you know, in Norman, Oklahoma in 1989 or 90, whenever it was. And so we went, and she literally even then was just like, come to the bunny. And we were like, what are you talking about? And she was referring to Bugs Bunny, which was the emblem for Warner Brothers Records. Oh. You know, and we were like, okay. And at this point, I'm not their manager. I'm just their friend. I'm sitting there with them. And, you know, it was very, you know, everyone was like, oh, cool. You know, there was no like, and this is how the deal will work or anything like that. It was really just like, come to Warner Brothers. And they're like, okay. And, you know, that was kind of it, you know. So I'm driving Roberta back to her hotel. And she says, hey, do the guys have a lawyer? And I was like, yeah, they do. You know, a guy named Bill Burrell, he's based in LA. And she said, oh, that's great. Do they have a booking agent? And I went, no. And she said, well, they'll have to get a booking agent. And then she said, do they have a manager? And I was like, no. And she said, you know, why don't you become their manager? And I was like, I'm just a record store clerk, you know. Yeah. I don't really know anything about this. And she said, you know, here's what I see. I see that these guys trust you. And I was like, yeah, you know, at this point we had a really great friendship, and I was, you know, anything I could do to help them, I would. And she said, you know how to talk to people. And I was like, yeah, you know, and at this point, you know, I look back now, you know, and Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers. And in it, he talks about, you know, these people that do amazing things that became experts because they spent 10,000 hours doing something. You know, the Beatles played 10,000 hours in Hamburg, Germany. Yeah. And, you know, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had computers in their homes before other people did. So they had all this time to spend. I do think of it now, and it's like I started working at a record store called Sound Warehouse when I was 15. And at this point, you know, I was in my mid-20s. I think I was 23, 24 when this was going on. And you know, I do think back and think, well, you know, in a weird way, I had gotten really great at talking to people about music and buying music and what they liked about music and things like that. So I felt, you know, in hindsight, I look back and it's like, yeah, she recognized something in that. And then she said, and I like you. That's good enough for Warner Brothers, you know? And I was like, okay. But I was too embarrassed to ever say anything to the guys. I never was like, hey, she said I should be your manager. Sure. I just didn't say anything. And you know, the deal got made. Warner Brothers, you know, created the paperwork with the Lips lawyer, and it was time for them to physically sign it. So they're like, we're going to fly you out to LA. And they asked me if I wanted to go along. And I was like, I would, yeah. You know, I kind of thought, oh, this is my reward for helping them all along, you know, to get to go to Warner Brothers Records, which to me was like Mecca. You know, it was this place where all of my favorite bands, you know, worked at Warner, you know, were signed to Warner Brothers. And you know, it was legendary, you know, even just to go to LA, you know, it was just like, man. So they flew me out with them. And what they do is they take you through the building and you're introduced to all the departments that are going to work with you. So here is the sales department. Here's the art department. Here's your product manager and these different people that work with you. Here's the touring department. And so I went to all these meetings with them, and I felt like, I had good questions, and I was, really, I was surprised to understand how much working in a record store actually taught me about how the music industry as a whole works, because you learn about distribution, you learn about sales, you learn about even touring, because you'd see how the bands, when they're going to come to Oklahoma or Dallas or something, and you'd see the routing, and it starts clicking like, oh, well, they're playing cities that they can, drive to overnight and all this kind of stuff. And so I kind of learned some stuff. And as I was going through these meetings, I was surprised at how much I actually understood what they were talking about. And they signed their paperwork, and there's this great photo of the 4 guys in the band and me and all these Warner Brothers people. And I really thought, okay, cool. Well, that's kind of it, And we came back, and like I said, we were living in this duplex, and one of the guys was in my part of the duplex talking to someone on the phone. I just heard him on the phone say, "Oh, you got to talk to our manager, Scott, about this." And that's when I found out I was the Flaming Lips manager. Sure. That's how I became a manager.
Right.
So it wasn't like this plan. It wasn't like this saying. It was this, and once again, this is part of why I want school to be the way it is. If you look at how we're built, we have performance students, we have production students, and we have music business students. And my idea was that hopefully the music business students will meet a performance student, and maybe they end up wanting to work together. And then they record with someone who learned how to be a producer here at the school. And, if you look at any scene that's happened over time, there's always young people that are wanting to be managers or record labels. And there's young people that want to be artists, of course. And there's young people that want to be producers. If you look at, say, Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles in the 70s, you had, not only did you have Jackson Browne of the Eagles and all these great, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, all these great artists, but you had young producers that were there working with them, or people like Peter Asher that moved from England and started recording a lot of these artists. But you also had young guys that wanted to be managers. You had, in particular, I always think of a guy named Elliot Roberts, who is Neil Young's manager, started managing him in his 20s and still manages him. They've been working together for 50 years. And his partner at the time was David Geffen, and they had a company called Lookout Management. And they were the same age as the artist, and they I felt like they understood them better. Yeah. So then they could work deals that made more sense for those artists and help them move it along. And so that, was part of the plan of doing this. Is I feel like, I think the closer the artist and the manager and the record label are in mindset and age, the more successful it can be. So, I think sometimes, younger artists come to me and they want me to be their manager, and I'm happy to give advice and stuff, but I'm hesitant ever to take on bands and artists that are too much younger than me because, sometimes I mean, there's things that I can do that are going to be super helpful for them, but I'd rather partner with someone and co-manage in that kind of situation because I feel like they need someone their age who really understands them and can, to some degree, translate what they want in a way that that us older folk need to be explained to, to some degree.
Yeah. And you kind of answered one of my other questions, which is what makes a good manager? Which you talked about, like getting to know the artist, but like what else do you think contributes to that?
Well, I think for me, what's helped me become what I hope is a good manager is being willing to know when I don't know something, and then being willing to learn about it.
Yeah.
So to me, another reason why, having a school is so important is I feel like I'm in a constant state of learning. Mm-hmm. And anyone that isn't, especially the way technology is changing, is, they're a fool, and they're not going to succeed or not do right by the artists that they're representing. Mm-hmm. And because I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know where this is going. In the sense of, how does the music industry look 5-10 years from now? I don't think anyone can tell you what that is. My mindset is based very much in the past of how to apply the past towards the present. Mm-hmm. And I find being around people who don't have the burden of that being helpful at times. So, the first thing to me would be willing to hear what others are saying and thinking, and be willing to admit it when you don't know. Because the biggest mistakes I've seen managers and people in the music industry make are when they act like they know everything and they make rash decisions that ultimately hurt everyone.
Yeah.
There's, in the movies and stuff, it always looks like, the record label's evil and they're out to exploit the artist, or the manager's dumb and they are only there to, live off the fruit of the labors of the artist. And it's like, man, it's not like that. Everyone wants everyone to succeed.
Yeah.
Right. The record labels, they want the artists to succeed because they're actually more often than not making more money from the artist than the artists are making.
Sure.
And a good manager is, they're not, here's a piece of advice. If a manager ever comes to you and they want you to pay them other than them taking a piece, if they want money in advance, as opposed to helping you earn money and then taking a piece of that, I'd say run away.
Sure.
Because they don't have faith in you, and that's, it just shows you that they're more out for the money than they are believing in what art you do. Mm-hmm. And I also recognize that early on, for artists and managers and stuff, there's no money. If you're a manager of an artist who's making $50 a night playing, and, your cut of that would be, $10 out of that. How does anyone survive? So I get where that's tough, and where you'd be like, oh, you should pay me if I'm going to be your manager. It's like, you got to suffer along with the bands. So anyways, but I say, be willing to learn, be willing to know, and ultimately always listen to your artist. I mean, it's like, you'll hear from them what they're willing to do or not willing to do. And then it's your job to figure out what's possible within those rules. And, if you feel like the artist is making a mistake, be willing to tell them that. It's very easy to fall in the trap of like, I don't want to say anything to upset the artist, and then people make bad decisions because of that. If you don't have a relationship with an artist where you can actually tell them the truth, then it's not going to succeed.
Right.
And this logic really applies to any business, or anything, but I think in particular working with musicians and film and any kind of art creation, when you add business to it, it makes some of those things harder.
Yeah.
So you just have to get over that, and, but ultimately, listen to what your artist wants.
Yeah.
And even when it seems impossible or counterintuitive, you should at least try. I don't think there's a time now when Wayne comes to me and says, I want to do something. I'll be like, Well, you can't do that. I mean, I'm always like, not because I'm placating him and just being like, oh yeah, we'll do whatever you want, Wayne. It's not like that. It's more like, well, let's try it.
Sure.
And I've got a partnership with Wayne and, in such a way now to where if at some point we do try it and it's not working, I can go to him and say, I don't think this is working. These are the reasons why. Mm-hmm. And, 9 times out of 10, we agree and decide, to follow a different path or deal with it in a certain way.
Right.
But, that partnership, between manager and artist is sacrosanct. There's nothing that should get in the way of that in the honesty in that relationship. Mm-hmm. And there are times when there's very difficult things you've got to tell people. And you're just as a human, your inclination is tried to avoid that. Mm-hmm. And that'll get you every time.
Yeah. What important factors contribute to an artist's success?
Well, I think, what I look for is a certain level of, pragmatism in the band. That how realistic are they mm-hmm. with where they're at in the world right now?
Sure.
So if a band comes to you, and this is, once again, a lot of this is human nature, mm-hmm. where every artist feels like they're already at the best they can be. They are like, I'm great, mm-hmm. And it's your job to explain to everyone how great I am, and what I look for are people that have already done a lot of the things that I'll be doing for them. Mm. Like they've already tried to get signed, or they've been doing a lot of shows and booking them themselves, or they've done a lot of the things that I will come in and be doing for them, so they understand what it is I'm doing, and that way we can communicate better, mm-hmm. right? I was just having a conversation with someone about how songs get licensed for movies, and sometimes movie directors will want you to write a song for the movie.
Right.
And a lot of times they'll just say, hey, I love your work. Just anything you do will be great. And then you go write a song for them. And they're like, well, I have this scene where someone's being murdered, and this is kind of too happy for that. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah. And
it's because there's a respect that gets in the way of being honest in a way, So I look towards people that are willing to hear what I say, and sometimes I'll say things to artists when they're coming to me for the first time that might be not off-putting, not like I'm being, mean to them or anything, but I might say something that's blatantly obvious to me, mm-hmm. just to see what their reaction is.
Right.
Like, most of the time it's usually that's a horrible band name. You need a new one,
Sure.
And seeing what the reaction is tells you a lot of where they're going to be even 10 years from now. If they're like, that's our name and we're going to stand with it. And it's like, well, there's 10 other bands that have that name. This is going to be a huge battle.
Yeah.
Or if you get someone going, yeah, I know, I've been thinking about this. I would lean towards people that are like, I've been thinking about this, know. That being said, there is something for people that are incredibly passionate and believe in themselves. You need that element too, but too much of it can get in the way of being successful, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. Sort of a quicker question. Do you make your own music? Have you ever wanted to be a musician?
Well, I waited too long. I didn't take any music when I was a kid. My son is a trumpet player in marching band, but he's also an amazing guitar player. And I look back now, and when I was going to school, band just didn't appeal to me at all. And I feel like that was a huge mistake. I wish I would have gotten involved with that and learned something. I mean, the idea of none of the instruments that were in band were played by any of the bands that I loved.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like, why would I do that? So I started trying to play guitar, in my early 20s, and I can play some chords or whatever, but I am not a musician by any means. So no, I don't make any music. I mean, there's a couple records I'm on that I was just there and made some noise, but no, I'm not a musician. That being said, though, I do feel like I have a lot of knowledge about how music works and is made and how it fits together without being a musician.
Sure.
Right? So I'm not someone who just, there's people that know nothing about music, and then there's musicians. I'm in this weird area in between, yeah, which is another place where I think I would have been a better manager if I was a musician. I think that that's something I wish I could have done. And I you can always go learn, right? But there's a lot of things where it's like I'd rather listen to records than play them.
Yeah. So I guess some of the questions that I had, you had already answered when you talked about ACM. Did you always want it to be a school, or do you think it, because you said it started out as sort of like a class, but then was it a vision of making it a school?
Well, I actually have a degree in education from UCO.
Okay.
I was supposed to be a high school history teacher. So, over the years, I saw this pattern with myself where anytime anyone would ask me to do a panel at South by Southwest or speak at a school if I was in town or something, I would always jump at it. And I love doing it, right? So I don't know, I had a company before ACM started called World's Fair. And what we did is we were a label management service. So we kind of would help artists if they had their own record label, or if you were a European record label, we had an office in New York and in Oklahoma, and we had a staff of people that could be basically a record label staff for hire. And one of the things I wanted to do with that was create a situation where artists from Oklahoma could come in and use some of the resources we had, like as simple as we had a color photocopier there. Come in and make flyers for cheap. Sure. Just buy the paper and bring it in. And we had access to databases of like every record store in the United States and list of booking agents and things like that, you have to pay for these things, but it's not that much if you're a company, but if you're a band,
right,
it's really expensive. So I kind of had this open door policy where artists could come in and hang out and take advantage of these things. And I thought that all these bands would come in and take advantage of it. And they really didn't. Usually what would happen is a band would show up and they'd think that they would come talk to me and I'd discover how amazing they were. And then I'd want to manage them, right?
Sure.
And there's only so much time a human has, right? So you have to be very careful with what you do. I mean, when I first started managing the Lips, I started collecting bands like you did records. I mean, there was one point where I worked by myself and I was managing like 13 bands. Ooh. And it was stupid. I wasn't doing a good job for anyone, right? So you learn over time, it's like, you can't do that. So what I wanted to do was still help a bunch of artists, but not have to manage them. And so there was a few bands that took advantage of it. One in particular did end up being a man that I ended up managing, color music. So Nick Lay and Ryan Hendricks both teach here. Nick is also in the Flaming Lips now. So In fact, a lot of people that were involved with World's Fair have ended up either in the Flaming Lips camp or working here or something like that, so which is very, very interesting. But I think that, I saw that wasn't, well, I don't think, I know that I saw it really wasn't working, that it was difficult. So I was kind of wrapping my head around what would be better to be able to help more artists here. Because I feel like ACM, the concept was not only to have a class originally about the music business, but also how can it help not only students, but everyone around? Because everything is interconnected. You think about, you and what you do. I mean, you've done 100 blogs already. How many of them were people that you only knew through ACM?
Right. Well, most.
Yeah. But then there was a bunch that weren't, right? And those interviews that you did with people that even were connected to ACM, how many of them are also connected to other artists or other things going on, right? So the idea was to create something that not only would be a school, but also kind of a focal point for anyone that does something in the music industry to have a resource here. So perhaps if you get connected to a student like you could come record here, right? But you didn't have to, it's not like every member of the band had to be going to school for you to record them here.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me, the school thing, that was an element of it that was just as important as having classes that taught people. So I welcome our students and our faculty and our alums to bring other people into this, because it creates more opportunities for everyone involved. And so how we ended up being a school just was like, a lot of times, when you think about what a manager does, I feel like one of the main things a manager does is it's our job to recognize an opportunity and then know whether to follow through on it or not. So if you're a band like the Flaming Lips, opportunities come daily. People call, they want you to play a show. Oh, they want you to do a song for a movie or whatever. And it's like, I have to weigh for a band like the Flaming Lips, and the same kind of equation applies to anything when it comes to recognizing what an opportunity does. But what's important to the Flaming Lips right now, I think first and foremost tends to be the first part of the equation is time. How much time is this going to take?
Yeah. And
then the second part is, what are the resources it's going to take to do it? And usually that means money, right? And then you take those two things and you determine what we get out of it. Is it worth spending the time and the resources on? And so I kind of apply that to everything, that goes on here. And yeah. I forget kind of where I was going there. I was like, there's a lot of, all of it is so interconnected. I guess I don't see a real difference between what we're trying to do for the community, what we are as a school, and what I do managing bands. Yeah. All of it is connected because so often, like with all the master classes that I get to come through here, the majority of those are people that I've gotten to know through me managing the Flaming Lips. So when you get an artist like Jackson Brown to come here, it's because I managed the Flaming Lips is how I got to know him. Yeah. And then we became friends and I was like, hey, would you come speak at school? And it's like, there's this level of immediate credibility when the manager of the Flaming Lips also works at a school about the music business. Yeah. And so when these artists hear that, then they're more likely to say, yes, I'll come do something. So it's all interconnected. So did I have an idea that it was going to be a school eventually? No. But what I did see was that the idea of a class was working. And then when I came across schools like there's an ACM in England and saw what they were doing, and then I presented that idea to the president here of like, maybe we should look at something bigger. And then he liked that idea. Then we pursued it, right?
Yeah.
So you recognize an opportunity. This is what managers do. You recognize an opportunity, and then you decide whether to follow through on it. So the idea of not just being a class or being a school was something I recognized as an opportunity. And an opportunity is something that doesn't just apply towards you. It applies towards everyone who potentially is going to be involved in the opportunity. So like when a promoter calls and they want to book a band that I manage, and they make you an offer, sometimes, and this will sound strange for a manager to say this, but sometimes they might make you an offer that's too good for the artist. And then the promoter will lose money, and then they might not want you to come back. Now, I could probably count on my hand the number of times I said we won't take more money, but you want the experience to be good for the promoter, because that promoter is someone you're going to want to go back and play a show for again down the line. So you have to think about everyone involved. When you sign to a record label, if you sign a deal for so much money that they're never going to make the money back, that's not good for them. And it's ultimately not good for you, because no matter how much money you make, you're going to spend it and you're going to need more. That's human nature. That's something I see again and again and again. I don't care who you are. And so, you want to be very cautious and careful, and you want to think about the whole circle and everyone that's involved. And you want to do something when you're making decisions that's good for everyone involved. It might hurt everyone just a little bit too, of like, oh, that's too much. That's more time than we wanted to spend, but we get paid more for it. And then the booking agent, it's like, oh, they're paying more than they wanted, but they get you there for a longer period of time, whatever, there's give and takes, right? So a lot of times, with the artist earlier in the career, you might make choices that when you take a class here and you learn about contracts and someone says, oh, you should never sign a contract like this. There might be times when that's the only contract that's available to you. And then what you do, hopefully what we teach you here, is to whittle away the things that make it such a horrible contract. But it's still not the best deal you could sign, but you're getting something that takes you to the next level. So you always want to think in that full circle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Sort of a broader musical and philosophical questions. Is there such a thing as bad music?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think bad music is defined by the audience that loves that kind of music, right? So I'm not the hugest hip hop fan, right? To me, hip hop, I bought a lot of the 12 inches singles and stuff that came out by Run DMC and stuff when hip hop first started. I loved African Bambaataa and that kind of thing. But where it's at now isn't my favorite thing.
Sure.
But I don't think it's bad music.
Right.
So I would be hesitant to tell you if if a student came in and played me some of their music, I would be hesitant to say whether I think it's good or bad.
Right.
Right. So I'd want one of my faculty or someone on staff here that's more into that thing to come in and say that. So there is obviously bad music when in the sense of people that can't hit, the notes when they're singing or whatever, but that's a whole different thing. I mean, my attitude at the school is really anything that anyone wants to try to do. I want to be a catalyst to help them be successful at that. I hope we have some of the biggest pop stars and hip hop stars and rock stars and country stars that come out of here, and at times that means that I have to step back and say, I'm not the best one to help you with this because I'm not super knowledgeable in it, you know? And I think that's another thing, you know, going back to our earlier part of the conversation, is being pragmatic and realistic about what you're capable of is a big part of being successful with what you do.
Yeah. What is selling out, and is there such a thing as selling out?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, the difference between when I was your age, selling out meant, you know, you would let people use your music in TV commercials and things like that. And, you know, early in the Flaming Lips career, we determined that we were never going to be a band that really was going to get played on the radio a lot, right? You know, and this was pre-internet. So it was like if you weren't played on the radio, people didn't hear you.
Yeah.
So there would be opportunities like, hey, the Flaming Lips could be on an episode of Beverly Hills 90210, you know? And, you know, we had this debate, is that selling out, doing that? And my attitude has always been, if you're not changing your music to be on Beverly Hills 90210, or if you're not changing your artistic vision for your music to be on a television ad, if what they're using is the art you've created, I would argue that's almost more subversive. You're changing the boundaries of what people listen to by getting your music out there, regardless of whether radio plays you or not.
Sure.
So whenever the Flaming Lips would have a song on a TV ad, I looked at it like, we're pulling something over the people's eyes here by getting this, you know, amazingly strange art rock band, the Flaming Lips, in an ad for Coca-Cola or whatever.
Sure.
That to me was the best of both worlds. We get paid for it and we're being subversive.
Yeah.
It all goes back to, a lot of my philosophy of things goes back to this band Devo, one of my favorite bands ever. And they had a huge hit with a song called Whip It, which, you know, people always thought of them as kind of a joke, but they were deep, deep thinkers who their music was a reflection of humanity and where we were at. And I always took that to heart of like, you know, if we can do the same thing like Devo, who were, you know, putting these thoughts out there that were like, humanity is devolving into something worse as opposed to getting better. You know, they grew up, you know, Devo, Jerry, the bass player and one of the singers in Devo, was there at Kent State, which during the Vietnam War had a huge protest, and the National Guard, which were other students, literally shot students there and killed them, you know, at a protest. He was there. And that shaped how they thought about, you know, where the world was going. And, you know, I always looked at them as like, man, if we could be like that, where you're part of popular culture, but your message is this thing that people don't even understand sometimes, that they're learning about humanity and how we think and how things should be different through their music. That's subversive and that's amazing. And that's what art should be doing. And I feel like the Flaming Lips are like that as well. I mean, you know, Wayne and the guys, I mean, they truly love people. And that is a huge expression, a huge part of their music. And anything I can do to get that message out there. I mean, I know that sounds very simplistic, but it's important. And so to me, anything we could do to get more people to hear it, then that's not selling out, that's winning. Yeah. And I feel like the idea of selling out has really, you know, gone away. So to me, you know, for commercial reasons, but to me, selling out is like, if you are an artist and you have a vision for what you want to do and you just give up on that and follow a path that someone else is leading you down, unwillingly. Now that's the key phrase here. It's like if you're unwillingly doing it, but only doing it for money. There's some people that are hired because they're great vocalists, but they might have a vision of what they want their music to be. So they work with producers and then they create music that the producers want to do. And that's fine. I don't see that as selling out either. So, selling out is really only the individual can determine that.
Sure.
You have to determine that for yourself. And I can honestly say that I feel like the Flaming Lips and any band that I've worked with, I've never felt like we've sold out. I feel like we've done things to get people to hear us and to get messages across, but I don't feel like we've ever sold out.
Yeah, that's really good. Do you separate art from the artist?
Sometimes. You'll meet these people that, I've been lucky to meet the majority of my heroes, right? I've met Bruce Springsteen and Lou Reed and Paul Simon and Paul McCartney and Devo. And, there are times when you meet these people and they're humans, right? So maybe you meet them on a wrong day and they're just kind of mean.
Yeah.
Or, tired and grumpy.
Sure.
And, you meet them and it's like, I don't know if I can ever listen to that in the same way again, So at some point you have to, there's some artists, Ted Nugent, right? Some of his early work, I think, is amazing. I love some early Ted Nugent, but politically, philosophically, he is at the polar opposite of where I am. And, when I'm listening to Stranglehold, one of his songs, which I think is great, it's like, I don't feel like guilty that I'm listening to it because it's a Ted Nugent song.
Sure.
Where I might draw the line might be Michael Jackson at this point. I don't know. I feel like I kind of have a rule in my head that it's like I can listen to everything up to the point of where he probably started going down a dark path. And I look at that as through Thriller. Everything after Thriller, I don't listen to. Everything before, I'm okay with all the Jackson 5 stuff, but, but I don't know, I think it's a great question. And I don't know. There's going to be, as time moves on, we're going to know more and more because everything is out there now, right? We're going to know more and more about artists as people and who they were as humans. And we might find these people that we don't like, that they did something that we don't like. Harvey Weinstein and his film company, what he's done to women is deplorable. But does that mean I'm never going to watch Pulp Fiction again? No. Where do you take it? Okay, he wasn't the guy who directed the movie, but he did give him the money to do it, and he's making money when that movie is being sold or watched or something. So do you not watch it? Because there's a lot of other people involved too that didn't do anything. Exactly. So it's a tough one. It's an interesting question, and I think that that there's no right answer for people as a whole. There's only the right answer for yourself, right?
What advice do you have for artists that are starting out?
Well, I think that, depending on the type of music you're doing, what I always try to get people to do is focus on their live show and building an audience here. Because if we do get to the point of where your music is something that a record label is going to want to sign, odds are, unless you're going to be a straight like pop artist or something, they're going to send someone here to see you play.
Yeah.
And if you're playing to 8 people in your own hometown and they see that, they're going to be like, well, if you can't even get an audience in your own hometown, and maybe that's not fair to say your own hometown. Maybe it's like Denton, Texas, for some reason that there's something that you've connected to people there. That's where you send people, but you need to be ready. You can't just come in and think, oh, I've got this great music and that's enough. You need to have several factors going for you. You need to have who you are, right? Your image, your look, what people want to see about you. You need to have that at least 3/4 of the way there. You need to have an audience for you.
Yeah.
And, those are the things I recommend for artists to be, ready for. Because if you do get someone from a record label to come out and see you, if you determine you want to be on a record label, if you do that and they come out, that's going to be the only chance you have for that person or label, because they're going to make their opinion right then, and then it's going to be very hard to ever change that. And it's also, those people are all friends with all the other A&R people and stuff. So it's like you have to think about them going back and telling everyone, you don't want to go out there. I saw them. They played to like 8 people. And the show was good, but why can't they draw more people? If they can't do it there, why, And record labels now, they don't want to sign anyone until there's already something happening.
Yeah.
They don't have to, you know? And now there's all the data out there for them to see, how many followers you have on social media and you can put videos up so they see what you look like and things. I mean, I think, be prepared to be honest with yourself of what you want to do. Everyone acts like they want to be huge, but it's like, maybe you don't really. Maybe what would you be satisfied with earlier in your career and focus on that?
Yeah.
So is my end goal, I want to play, the Jones Assembly. Well, that's 1,500 people. That's a lot of people.
Sure.
So maybe we should focus on playing, the Performance Lab first and see if you can get 300 people there.
Right.
And then go from there. So create realistic goals, but try to make them happen, because the first time it won't, second time it won't, third time it won't, unless you're really, really lucky. And sometimes people are really, really lucky.
Sure.
But it's like people that, are in the oil and gas. Sometimes you hit a huge pocket of oil and gas and you make a crap load of money. Other times you try and there's nothing there.
Right.
But do you give up? No, you keep trying.
Scott, thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks. This was fun. Yeah.
Do you have stuff to plug?
Well, we're enrolling at the school. So, if you are interested in, going to school here, hit us up. We teach people to be performers, producers. We teach various aspects of the music business. So I'd love for you to come tour the school and see what we're doing, and see what that's all about. I have 2 albums coming out soon that I'm involved in. One is a band called Night Moves. It's a band from Minneapolis that I co-manage with Scott Marsh, who works at the Jones and books all the bands there and everything. And their record's coming out June 28th on Domino Records. And they're amazing. They're really great. Young band. It's their 3rd album. This is the first one I've worked with them on. And then they'll be touring as well. And the Flaming Lips have a record coming out on in mid-July called The King's Mouth, which we released for Record Store Day already, but it's going out for wide release now. So it'll be on stream. You'll be able to stream it, and there'll be CDs, and there'll be, instead of gold vinyl, there'll be black vinyl copies of it available. And, that's kind of it. Color Music have a record that came out recently, and they're working on a new record as well. They're very prolific.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's just, I just, all the bands from here. I mean, there's so many great artists. there's this band, the Sweet Talkers, that came to visit me the other day, and their EP is really great. They're a band that needs to change their name, but I'll let them I'll let them figure that out. But it's not a bad name. It's just there's other Sweet Talkers, so it gets confusing. One of my favorite bands here is the Love Seats, who are also perform under the name Chelsea Days with a couple extra guys. I really dig what they're doing. There's so many things that are involved here. I always so happy with Dante Jones, who's one of our alums, who has a band called They that's on Warner Music. I think he's great. But I'm almost just as curious about the other things he produces and other songs he works on and stuff like that. Yeah. So, it's just never ending. Keep an eye on the, Facebook pages for ACM and for Hellfire, which is my management company, Hellfire Enterprises Limited. I post a lot of stuff on that. And just, those are the things I want to plug, I guess.
Yeah. Listen to and pay for the music.
Yeah. These days, streaming is great. Just listen and listen and listen.
Yeah. And I will say that, now that I'm a graduate, but ACM has been a huge part of my life, my formation as a person, and foundational for where my career is going to go. So I think that I wouldn't be who I am without ACM.
Yeah, me neither. It goes both ways. It's like I'm a different person because of all of you that I've gotten to know and everything that you guys have done. I recently got this award from the governor, for the Arts and Education Governor's Arts Award. And, I've said this time and time again, and I really believe it. I didn't get it. The school got it. Our students got it. It was about, all the things that we collectively do. I was just the representative for that. And, this hopefully, it makes me really happy to hear you say that, because that's what I want, is just this to be a catalyst for you to be able to do something you really want to do and make a good living doing that and be happy. So
that's the next step, making a living, but that's a separate thing.
Well, maybe you'll become this huge podcaster and people will spend lots of money wanting you to sponsor them and all that kind of stuff. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'm Santiago Ramones.
Scott Booker.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. You can find my demo on my website, Songs with Words, and you can pay money for that or not. Pay whatever you want. And then you can find this podcast on all of the places that you can listen to podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher. Himalaya is a cool thing. I think they have like tip jars or something. So if you want to give me money, that'll be a neat thing. And I always end my podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.